We're going to continue. We certainly, in the short time that we have together, are not going to be able to cover all of the parables. And so I'm just going to pick out a few here and there that I think are of great importance. And the parable that we have chosen tonight, some would think is not even a parable. It doesn't start out like the ones we have in Matthew 13, which says the kingdom of heaven is like unto, and then he tells a story. This one here doesn't start that way. But it meets all the requirements of a parable. Even though it's not a story, the definition of a parable is when you take one thing and you parallel it to another. You take a simple story that Jesus did about the sowing of a seed and so forth, and then he applied it to the church. He applied it to, God's people, the kingdom of heaven. And so, in every sense, this meets that qualification because he's talking about the salt of the earth and the light of the world. He's taking two qualities, salt and light, and he's saying, here's what you are like. Here's what you should be like. Those who were his followers at that time and his would-be followers. And that includes you and I tonight. One of the interesting things about the parables of Jesus is that he often gave the parables or told the parables in couplets. In other words, there were usually two parables that was talking about the same thing, only it come from a different direction. For instance, in Matthew the 13th chapter, just to back up what I'm saying here, in Matthew the 13th chapter, the first parable that you find there is the sower of the seed. And that seed is planted into different soils, wayside, stony, thorny, and the good ground. And we realize, that when we preach the word, that's exactly what we're doing. We're not going to preach to everybody that is receptive to the gospel, and you're going to find some who just have a stony heart. You can't penetrate that. The next parable that Jesus gives is on the wheat and the tares. We're still talking about sowing. He said a man went out and he sowed the seed in his field, and then the enemy came at midnight and sowed tares in his field. It still has to do with sowing, but it's from different angles. You go on to the next couplet, the mustard seed and the leaven. He talks about the mustard seed and how that it is the smallest of all seeds, and yet it grows up. And then he talks about the leaven. Those of you, and some of you don't even do this anymore. You don't bake bread anymore, but some people still do. But you take a little bit of leaven and put it in some meal, and that thing will just grow, won't it? It just swells up until you got some good biscuits coming out of there. But that little bit of leaven works secretly and silently, whereas the mustard tree, you can actually see it, You can see it growing and so forth. You can, of course, with the meal that has it in, but you can't see how it's working. And that's the way the church grows. You really can't see how it works. You just know that eventually one day you see that it's grown. All right, the next couplet in this particular chapter is the treasure that a man found accidentally as he was walking out through the field. In that day, they didn't have banks and so forth. And so when they didn't have any banks to put their money in, the farmers would often take their money, put it in a tin can, take it out in the field and hide it. I still know people that do that. I do. There's people who still don't trust the banks. And they will take their money and go and hide it. The only problem with that is the man that hid it is going to die someday. And that old money's laying out there in that ground. And that's the story right here. This man found a treasure in the field. So what he does, he goes and buys the field, and now the treasure's his. He could have said, well, I found the treasure. No, it's on my ground. If it's on my ground, it's my treasure. And no more, because he bought the field. He sacrificed all and did everything that was necessary so the treasure could be his. And then there's the pearl of great price. A man was seeking for the pearl. He was seeking, and when he found it, he was willing to sacrifice all and to buy that pearl of great price. So you have these couplets that are found in the Bible. In Matthew 25 is another set of couplets. You have, in the first 13 verses, have to do with the 10, what are they really? The people who, the ladies that were supposed to come and wait for the bridegroom. Virgins, 10 virgins. I couldn't think of it. That's old age catching up with me. So there were the 10 virgins, 5 wise, 5 foolish. And we know how that story comes out. And it's talking about preparation in it, being prepared, having your extra oil, you know, in the lamp. I want to just show you something. I got it with me, and I'm not going to preach that sermon, but I want to show you this. You know, I've often wondered about that story about, you know, their lamps burn out in the middle of the night. I thought, how could that be possible? I'm thinking about the old coil lamps that we used to use, you know, years ago. Our dads and moms and our grandpas and so forth, you know, got that big old tank of oil, and how could that burn out in a couple hours? That's not the lamp they used. This is the lamp they used. This is the lamp. This came right from Jerusalem. This is the lamp they used. And they filled this with oil. They put the wick down in this hole, and that was the lamp. It didn't take long to burn that up, and that's why they ran out of oil. And so they realized, the 5 wise realized that they needed to have extra oil with them, and they did, and they filled the lamps, and they were ready. The next few verses talks about the 3 men who were given talents. And they were given these talents, and the king or the master, he went on his way, and he comes back to reward those men. The one with the 5 gained 5 more. The man with the 2 gained 2 more. The man with the 1 went hid his in the ground, you remember. Well, again, it's a sermon on rewards and what you do with the gifts that you have. Of course, the talents there wasn't gifts. It was actually a form of money. But it's what you do with what is given to you to prepare yourself for that home in heaven. Well, tonight we turn to the book of Matthew, the 5th chapter, and verses 13 through 16. We have another couplet, really, because he's talking about the light of the world, the salt of the earth. And in this, he, as I said, this was prior to Matthew 13. Matthew 5 is quite a few verses prior to it. It was earlier on in the life of Jesus, but if you remember, the apostles came to Jesus in Matthew 13. It says, "Why do you teach in parables?" So Jesus had already been doing that by the time we get to Matthew 13. He'd already been using that form of teaching. For in Matthew 13, as I read to you last night, there was not anything that he said unto the multitudes except by parables. And so Jesus used simple illustrations like this. As we read this passage, ye are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its savor, wherewith shall it be salted? There's different ways of looking at that, but I thought about, this last winter when I was working on these things, I thought about how that, we get a lot of ice, and you folks do too. What do you do when you get ice in your driveway or you walk? You put salt on it. We go down, we buy a bag of rock salt, and we put it down. What if you put that rock salt on there and it didn't do a thing? It'd be worthless. What about the food that you salt, to flavor and so forth, and there's no flavor to it? What good would that do? And that's what he's pointing out here. You're the salt of the earth, but if you lose your saltiness, if you lose the quality of salt, you're not good for anything. And then he goes on to say, it thenceforth good for nothing to be cast out and to be trodden under the foot of men. Ye are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. I've traveled many a time through the night, and it's a refreshing thing when you're going through the darkness and you top that hill, and on the other hill is this huge city, lights just as shining and just a beaming. That's a wonderful feeling to know that you're not alone anymore, because there are lights out there that's going to show you the way. He says, neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel. You don't light it and then hide it. You put it on the bushel so that all that are in the house may be able to see that light. And then he says this in verse 16, let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. So Jesus may have been talking to a very special people here. He may have been talking, and he was talking to the multitudes just here, because in that same chapter, he goes on and tells them that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, in no way can enter into the kingdom of heaven. So he is warning them, but he's telling them, here's what I want you to be. I want you to be the salt of the earth. I want you to be the light of the world. A parable is, this parable, or these two things that is referring to, I think show the distinctiveness of the quality of the person that is a member of the church. Now, a lot of the parables there in Matthew 13 had to do, as I said, that's kind of a Bible within a Bible, because, it starts out with the planting of the seed, ends up with the dragnets, the judgment day, and it talks about the growth of the church, the greatness of it, and all of that. But most of the parables had to do with the quality of the people in his kingdom. The type of character that they are, the personality that they have, and the life that they live. And this is one of those right here that's dealing with the life of a Christian. And I think he's trying to tell us that your life is distinctive. It stands out because there is nothing like salt. Did you ever think about that? We was down at our house there a little while ago. We looked up in the cupboard. We was frying some hamburgers, and I wanted to put some salt. Do you know they didn't have no salt? They had everything but. That cupboard up there was full of all kinds of seasonings, garlic salt, you know, and lemon pepper and all this kind of stuff, but there was no salt. In a shaker, they had that big old can, but you ever try to, you know, shake one of them big old cans over a hamburger? It wouldn't be any good because too much salt comes out. There was no salt shaker. There's nothing quite like salt. It's distinctive. It stands on its own. There's nothing quite like light, is there? I mean, what would you compare to it? The sun. The sun is the light. But there's nothing like it in the world. And so he is in these two particular stories showing you and me that we are distinctive, that we are peculiar, that we are different than the world around us. That's what he's trying to show us. There's so much in this little parable, but the main thought, I think, is that of distinctiveness. Both light and salt are distinctively different from that which it touches. Do you ever think about that? The salt that you put on that hamburger is altogether different than that hamburger. Or the salt that you put on that ice is altogether different than that ice. And that's the way we are. We are different from what we are to affect. And we are to affect the world. We are to change the world and bring the world closer to Christ. So it is different from that which it touches, both in nature and in its purpose. All right, let's go to the first one. We're just going to jump in here. I don't want to, waste a whole lot of time trying to explain this parable. I just want to tell you what all these things are. So we're going to talk about the salt of the earth and what that represents and what that means as far as us being God's people. I believe the believer is to be God's salt to flavor the world. Can you imagine what this world would be like if you were not the salt of the earth? What would this world be like without the impression that Christianity has made upon it? Now I realize that Christianity is in the minimum now. I mean, we're not the majority of people. We're in the minority of people as Christians. But at least as we got to this point, the year 2025, Christians have truly made a difference in this world. It was Christian principles upon which our nation was built. You and I enjoy the freedoms that we have. They have forgotten that in government. They have forgotten that in the higher areas of life. But that's what our nation was built upon the principles of Christianity. And so you see, it's God's way of flavoring the world by having his people here in this world doing the things that they do. There is no other way to influence the world. The task, it belongs to believers and believers alone. Do you think people are just going to pick up the Bible? All the people in the world are going to pick up this Bible and read it daily? No. There's a lot of people that don't do that. There's a lot of Christians don't pick up this Bible, but they do read you. There's a song with this songbook, I think it's entitled, "We Are the World's Bible." And we are. We are the world's Bible. People look at us and they see us, and hopefully they will be a better person because they have seen the influence that we've had in their life. The Apostle Paul told Timothy, "Be thou an example of the believer." And he told him in the areas to be an example in word and faith and in love and purity and so forth. Be an example of the believer. And that's what salt is. It is flavoring the world, and you flavor the world as you live the Christian life. There's the sense that the church is the salt factory of the world to the marketplace of the world. The problem is we are storing up too much salt. We've got it locked up in our own personal lives. We've got it locked up in the church. When we leave the church, we leave the salt in the church. You're the best people there are when it comes Sunday morning. You're here worshiping, you're here praising God and all that. What about when we go into the world? Are we leaving the salt behind? And I think it may be the case a lot of times in our lives, myself included. We just have to be careful with this, not to leave the saltiness behind in the church building. All right? Let's look at the characteristics of salt. It is distinctive. I've already said that. The Christian character is as distinctive as salt is. It is totally different from the foods or the objects that it is placed upon. There is no other taste like salt. I think I've proven that to you before. You will know when it is placed onto the food. Have you ever been in the hospital? Have you ever eaten hospital food? They don't put salt on it. I'll guarantee you will notice the difference. It's different than the way the mama cooked it. It's different than the way your wife cooks it. It's different than the way, especially, that your grandma cooked it way back yonder. Because they don't put salt on that food in the hospital. And you will know it when it's not there. And you will know it when it is. That's how distinctive salt is. It'll not taste like garlic. It'll not taste like pepper. You know that it will be salt. And that's what I think about Christianity. We ought to have people know who we are. I mean, we shouldn't have to have people wonder, well, I wonder if he's really a Christian. I wonder if he's really living the life. No, we need to have people know that we are salt because we have touched them in such a way with our faith. In Romans, the 12th chapter, verse 2, be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. So if we're conforming ourselves to the world in the way we dress and the way we talk and the things that we do in life, we're not distinctive from them at all. So that's why Paul says, be not conformed to this world. Don't be like them, because you are the salt of the earth. You are distinctive. You are separate. All right. In 1 John 2, 15 through 16, John even addressed this subject. He said, love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, and the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And so if we in this world have this love for the world and don't have love for the church or don't have love for Christ like we should be, we are not the salt of the earth. We are not distinctive. In James 1, verse 27, he says, pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this, to visit the fatherless and the widows in their affliction, and to keep himself unspotted from the world. I think this is one of the things that Jesus had in mind when he said, you are the salt of the earth. You are different, and there's going to be nobody like you. All right? Number 2, salt preserves. In the olden days, your grandpas, probably, maybe your great-grandpas, they used to preserve meats. I remember as a child going to my grandma and grandpa's home on my mother's side. And we'd go there for dinner on Sunday after church. And I remember down in the hollow down there, they had a spring house. Remember the old spring houses? The old spring come up and they built a house over it. And they would insulate it to whatever best they could, with newspapers or whatever. But you go in that spring house, it was cool. And I remember looking up, and on the rafters of that thing would be these hams hanging, salted down. They didn't have refrigeration back then. And that's the only way they could preserve the meat, was to salt it down, layer it with salt. My brother-in-law Joe, Ronnie, you know Joe, my brother-in-law and I, we used to buy deer hides. We live way out in the country out there. A lot of people kill deer. We would buy deer hides. You know how bad a deer hide stinks? When it gets warm and you get a bunch of them, it'll just stink to high heaven, as they say. But we would take salt and you'd layer that thing with salt, and somehow that just seemed to take care of the whole thing. You just layer it with salt, and it would preserve that thing till we got a whole pile of them, and we could take it to the buyer, and we'd sell all our hides to him. But you had to preserve it with salt. It has that ability because it is a preservation. It keeps things from going bad. It keeps things from decaying. It also cleanses and disinfects. Haven't you ever heard of Epsom salts? I'm sure you have. Have you not soaked your feet in Epsom salts? That was an old-time, remedy, I guess. But the Epsom salts, and maybe I'm wrong here, Brother Jerry. Maybe you know more about it than I do. But Epsom salts has a way of cleansing, cleaning the wound out and so forth. And people would use salt even for cleansing purposes, for medical reasons as well. Believers, just like the salt, are to cleanse and preserve the world from evil, preserve the world from decay. They are to disinfect the world and keep things from going bad. Let me show you how this happens, how this works. This is a parable, if you mind. It's a present-day parable, Back when I was a young teenager, nearing 20s, I guess. I don't even remember if we were married by that time. But we, in LeCounte Mills, we lived 15 miles from the nearest firehouse. Clearfield was the closest town that had a fire engine. And so if a house burned down in LeCounte Mills, the people came with their fire truck, and all that would be standing was the chimney, because the house was gone by 15 minutes. So this happened a couple of times. And so by that time we decided, well, we need to have us a little fire company here in LeCounte Mills. And so we got together, some of us, I was a part of it, my dad, my uncle, and Brother Calvin Martell from Clearfield, and just a bunch of us. But what a lot of us was members of the church because we lived in that community. And then you had, of course, your just average Joe that didn't go to church but was interested in saving houses. So we built this fire company, bought us an old 1951 Ford truck, I think it was, and we started out with that. And so, a fire company has to have money to operate, to buy equipment and so forth. And so we decided we'd have us some fundraisers. And so there in our little town of LeCounte Mills, we would have, a carnival. We'd set up, and maybe have a little company come in with a few rides, and we had some games that you would play, and we raised money by operating this little carnival. Well, we did that for a couple years. Finally, it came up in one of our fire meetings, and a person asked, do you think that we could add alcohol to our carnival? We could make a lot of money. And you've seen this where they do that, and we could make a lot of money if we just sold a little bit of alcohol here, and immediately, someone spoke up that wasn't a member of our church. Someone spoke up and said, no, that would not be right to do, because we have members of the church in this fire company. He was referring to me and my dad and my uncle and Brother Calvin and so forth. Said it wouldn't be right to have that because we have members of the church here. Do you know what we did? We were the salt of the earth for a moment. Our little group of men that were members of that organization was the salt of the earth. We prevented decay. We prevented the wrong that would have taken place. And to this day, I don't guess they have. I'm not a part of it anymore, but to this day, I don't guess they have that at all in those money-raising things that they do, because we stopped it. We didn't say a word. We didn't have to say a word. Our friends and our community said it for us. So I'm glad to tell you that story. I'm not bragging. I'm just simply saying you can be the salt of the earth. You can prevent decay just by standing and believing and practicing what you believe. All right, salt penetrates. That's a quality, and this is a quality that Christians ought to have, is that we should be penetrating people's lives. It inserts a new quality, a new substance into life, and it changes that into which it is good. We know that to be a fact. When you cook with salt and you put it in there, it just changes the quality of it completely. It just gives it an altogether different taste. Christians are likewise to penetrate the world and insert new life into it. We ought to be the kind of person that wherever we are in the workplace, if it's a little cubicle in an office, if it's out in the shop, working on an automobile, if it's up on the top of a roof, nailing shingles on, whatever the case may be, we need to put new life into that situation. We're, as Christians, we're not the people that are going to slack. We're not the people that's going to, try to do things behind the boss's back and cheat and lie and not give them a full 8 days work. No, we're not that kind of people. We are going to put new life into whatever that we do, because we're going to put our all into it. And that's what Paul was talking about when he says in 2 Corinthians 5, verse 17, therefore, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. If we have been a slacker, if we have been a cheater or a liar or whatever, we're not going to do that anymore, because we have a new life, and that is what's going to be seen by those around about us. In Colossians 3 and 10, he says, and have put on the new man, which is renewed in knowledge after the image of him that created him. And who does that for us? Of course, Jesus. The life of Jesus in our life is that which, of course, changes us. I think I've told you about the people in India, and they're not very nice people. And when you're there, just the average normal Indian person, they're very rude to you. They're not very polite at all. But one of the things that I have noticed is that members of the church are not like that at all. We go into those church assemblies, and there'll be the last time I went, we had 150, 200 people about every time. And they are the happiest people. They are the most polite people. And I wonder what makes the difference in them. The only thing that makes the difference in them is the great salt shaker above. That's the only thing that makes a difference. Jesus has changed their lives, and these people are changing the lives of those who are in the world and converting them constantly over and over again. That's what salt does. It will penetrate the life of your friends and your neighbors who need the example that you set. All right? A lot of these things, of course, that I'm showing you here are they kind of repeats and they kind of overlap. And we've talked about this, how that it flavors. It influences the taste of things. It takes a bland, tasteless food and makes it delicious. Christians are to so flavor and influence the world for Christ. Galatians 2 tells you how you do that. He says, but the fruit of the Spirit, and that's what we should have, is the fruit of the Spirit. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law. There's a lot of things that there are laws against. There's a law against taking a person's life. There's a law against, being hostile to a certain person. And even though maybe the law doesn't carry these things out, but there's a law against, doing things to somebody that is of a different nationality than you are. There are laws against doing evil to men. But did you ever stop and think there's not a law against expressing love? There's not a law when you show temperance. There's not a law against you being happy. There's not a law against you being gentle or against you being good. Isn't that wonderful that here are a list of things you can do that you'll never disobey the law on? And these are the things that ought to be found in our character as we flavor the world. Salt is a quiet thing. It's not like that snap, crackle, and pop, cereal that you hear about. They used to advertise, you sit there and you listen to it fizzle and so forth. Salt doesn't do that. Salt just lays on the food, and it's just as quiet as can be. It's not boisterous. It doesn't want to brag about itself and say, look at me, look what I'm going to do. It doesn't do that. And a Christian will not do that either. He will just go quietly about his work. It is visible, but it works quietly, making no noise whatsoever doing its work. In fact, when you put that salt on that hamburger, you may see it as you sprinkle it on, but you don't ever see it again, do you? You don't ever see it again. It doesn't pop up and say, hey, I'm here. No, but you know it's there. And that's the way a Christian works. We don't go around bragging about what we do. We just do our work, and we just kind of filter in, We just kind of blend in with what we're trying to change. Christians, the salt of the earth, are to work quietly and discreetly, just like in 1 Peter 3, verse 4. And I want to just look at that in a little more detail. 1 Peter 3 and 4 says, but let it be the hidden man of the heart, in that which is not corruptible, even the ornament of a meek and quiet spirit, which is in the sight of God of great price. What's he talking about here? In this passage, he is talking about the woman who has an unbelieving husband. That's who he's addressing here, or what he's addressing. Likewise, ye wives, verse 1 says, be in subjections to your own husbands, that if any obey not the word, they also may without the word be won by the conversation of the wise. I personally have seen this happen many, many times. I personally know brothers who all their married life tried to keep their wife from going to church. They didn't like the church, and they did their very best to try to get people not to go to church, or their family or their wives. And eventually I've seen those same men obey the gospel of Jesus Christ. And it wasn't because that wife preached to him. It's because of her meek and quiet spirit. She was the salt of the earth. She had put herself into the life of this man to such an extent that he couldn't get rid of it. He couldn't get rid of it. And he obeyed the gospel. I've seen it happen so many times. He says, while they behold your chaste conversation coupled with fear, whose adorning? Let it not be that outward adorning of the plaiting of the hair, the wearing of the gold, or the putting on of apparel. Sometimes a wife thinks she's got to decorate herself up, to be pleasing to her husband. He said, that's not the way it's done. You don't decorate yourself up to do this right here. But he says, let it be the hidden man of the heart. There's where the change is going to come. When that hidden man of the heart goes about and continues to do its work. I was in Oklahoma City out there. Dwight and Elaine lived in Tulsa quite a bit, but a lot more. Dwight lived out there many of his life's years. But I was working in Oklahoma City, and I was working with a church there in that area. And what was it, 51st to McKinley Street. It was McKinley Street, I think it was 50. And so we had our little slogan. One of the brethren would go with me, and we covered that whole area, door-to-door knocking. Kind of like the Mormons, we just went everywhere. And we just door-to-door knocking, and we would invite people to come. I had my little speech all ready, when they opened the door. I'm Raymond Stiner from the Church of Christ at 51st and McKinley Street. And we are here trying to, meet people, and we're trying to get people maybe to want to have a study of the Bible or to come out to church. I had my little speech, and it was just memorized. And I just went from house to house and said, and one day we knocked on this door. This man came to the door, and I started my speech. And I didn't get but into about the second sentence of that speech. I said, I'm Raymond Stiner from the Church of Christ. And when I said Church of Christ, he blew up. He blew up. He was mad. You could see his face was turning beet red. He was just mad. And he said, my wife has been telling me I'm going to hell all our married life. I don't need you telling me. And he slammed the door in my face. I can just imagine. I can imagine the conversations that went on in that home, can't you? I can imagine that she badgered him and she prodded him, and every chance she got, she dug him with this thing. You need to go to church, you need to be a member of the church and all of that. I can just imagine that's what happened. And you weren't about to win that man. But a woman that will have a chaste life, who will submit herself to her husband, will love her husband, she is the salt of the earth. Because her good life is going to quietly work in such a way that she will win him without the word. The salt spreads. I don't care what part of the hamburger you put that on. It's going to taste the same all over that hamburger. I don't care where you put it. It spreads. It has that ability. And you think, well, I've not put it over here. Well, no, but it gets over there somehow. And that's the way a Christian should be, the salt of the earth. He should be able to spread all over wherever it is. Its flavor spreads all about it. Sprinkle of salt has a widespread effect. A Christian salt spreads far and wide. But sanctify the Lord God in your hearts. Be ready always to give an answer to every man that asketh you a reason of the hope that is in you with meekness and fear. We need to be able to answer. We need to be able to stand on our principles, our convictions, and just wherever it takes us, that's where we need to go, because we're the salt of the earth. And that you study to be quiet and to do your own business, and to work with your own hands as we commanded you, that ye may walk honestly toward them that are without, that ye may have lack of nothing. And so we should spread the gospel through our life. All right, salt is irrepressible. Salt is irrepressible, meaning that you cannot turn it around. Meaning that once you salt something, you can't ever get rid of it. Did you ever know that? I like to cook. And a lot of times, Gail will tell me it's a little salty, because I get a little strong on the pepper and the salt and the garlic salt and all that stuff. I get to shaking it on there. And a lot of times I will salt too much. In fact, one time I tasted it and I knew it was too salty myself. So I added the same amount of sugar. That doesn't work. Sugar and salt just don't mix. But it didn't work, because you can't ever take the salt back out. Once you get the salt in there, it's there. You can't remove it. Did you know that? And that's the way a Christian is. Once you have influenced somebody's life, do you know it's never coming back out? Once you've done something as a Christian in the presence of someone, do you know they never forget that? It's just something the way that salt works. And so you're the salt of the earth. You're there, if you've got your impact and your influence in somebody's life, you're there for good. All right? Once applied, it can't be stopped. A Christian's influence has testimony, cannot be stopped, it cannot be erased. In fact, in Isaiah 55, he even pointed that out as far as God's saltiness, in other words. He said, "For as the rain cometh down, and snow from heaven, and returneth not thither, but watereth the earth, and maketh it bring forth and bud, that it may give seed to the sower, and bread to the eater. So shall my word be that goeth forth out of my mouth. It shall not return unto me void. It shall be accomplished that which I please, and shall prosper in the thing whereon I sent it to." And so this is the way that our life is, and our presentation of the gospel. When you give it out there and you put it out there, it's there, and people aren't going to forget it. Now I want to show you a picture of something here. Have you ever seen this? FedEx. You know what FedEx is? It delivers all your Amazon packages, or a lot of them. And so you see the FedEx truck pretty often. You'll see the tractor and trailers going down the interstate pretty often, and you've seen these packages, you've seen this sign. Did you know that this sign, that's just simply FedEx, simple sign, is considered one of the greatest developments of advertising that has ever been known? Did you know that? If there was a list from 1 to 10, it's right up there close to number 1. Whoever developed this advertising, or this name for FedEx, has done something that is considered one of the greatest feats of all time in the advertising world. Do you know why? David does. It's because in FedEx there is an arrow. Do you see it? You may not have ever seen that before. There is an arrow in FedEx, which means always going forward. In fact, I guess it's UPS. They said UPS never makes a left turn when it goes out to deliver its goods because they just waste time. They will go and they come back. They always make right turns. I don't know if that's true with FedEx or not, but that's true with UPS. They always make right turns because left turn takes too much time. Okay, so, but I want you to notice this right here, this little, and I'll guarantee you from tonight onward, from tonight onward, you will never want to see this, okay? Every time you get a FedEx package, you're going to see this. Every time you see a tractor trailer going down the road, your eye is going to go to that arrow every time. It did for me. When it was pointed out to me, I can't unsee it. That's kind of the way salt is. It's something, once you see it, you can't ever forget it. So please, brothers and sisters, live the kind of life that you ought to live, because people can't unsee it. I've had those who call themselves Christians, and they may use vulgar words. They may curse and swear. I can't unsee that. I can't unhear that in my mind. I can't unsee a Christian who becomes, brutal or angry or wants to be, a fighter or something. I can't unsee that. So make sure that what you do, that you want people to be able to remember, because that's what salt does. The light of the world. Now, look at here. We're at 7:30. I'm not only going to preach the whole counsel, I'm going to preach it double tonight. So we'll get through this because there's a lot of repetition here with the light of the world. It's a couplet, but the light of the world is seen first of all in God. God is light. The Bible says plainly, 1 John 1 and 5, "This then is the message that we have heard of him and declare unto you, that God is light, and in him is no darkness at all." And then you have Jesus Christ, his Son, coming along, and he says this, "Then spake Jesus again unto them, saying, I am the light of the world. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life." Jesus said in Matthew 5, "You are the light of the world." You consider how great that is? We're right up there in the level with God and Jesus. We're not equal with them, but we're right up there in the level that they have, that they are the lights of the world. God is the light. Jesus said, "I am the light of the world." Jesus turned around and said, "You are the light of the world." So we have something in common with God and with Christ. And we are identified with them. And what a responsibility that is, as well as a compliment. It is a compliment that we fit into that category of God and Jesus as far as being lights. But it is a responsibility. Wherever light is, or whatever light is, and whatever it does, the Christian is to do and to be. All right, light penetrates. You know, you walk into a dark room and you turn on the light, it just penetrates everywhere. It goes into every corner. It goes into every crevice. In fact, sometimes if you're standing on the outside and there's, you know, holes through the doors and the windows, you see that light. It penetrates right on through it. And that's the way that, again, a Christian is to be. We are to, just like the salt in this sense. As I said, there's a lot of repetition here. And I was amazed when I studied this, how much the Bible talks about darkness and light. You know, did you ever look up the word darkness? There's really no definition for darkness. It is the absence of light. And so when the light comes on, the darkness dispels. Jesus said unto them, yet a little while is the light with you. That's Jesus. Walk while ye have the light, lest darkness come upon you. For he that walketh in darkness knoweth not whither he goeth. Light also reveals. You take a flashlight, you take a headlight on the car, it reveals what is in front of you. It opens up a truth. It opens up an area, a whole new world. It reveals for you the way to walk. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. And who is Jesus? He is the light of the world. He reveals it to us. Jesus said in John 12:36, while ye have light, believe in the light, that ye may be the children of light. These things spake Jesus, and departed, and did hide himself from them. Light also enlightens us. You know, it enlarges a person's vision. It enlarges the knowledge of where he is going. Now at home, and I think probably all of us are the same way. At home, you know, when I got to get up maybe in the middle of the night and go to the bathroom, I don't turn on the light. Do you turn on the light? No. You don't want to wake up the missus. You don't want to wake up the kids. So you don't turn on the light. Why? Because you know where you're going. But over here at this house we're staying in Paintsville. I mean, there's tables and chair legs and so forth. I'd be knocking my feet right off of my leg because I don't know where I'm going. So light reveals the way. That's exactly what a Christian is. That's what Jesus is saying. You're the light of the world. You're revealing the way for people to walk so that they don't walk in darkness. John 12:35. Then said Jesus unto them, let a little while this light is with you. Walk while ye have the light, lest darkness come upon you. For he that walketh in darkness knoweth not whither he goeth. And we've looked at that verse before. But light guides us. It directs the way to go. It leads along the right path. I am come, Jesus says in John 12:46, as a light into the world. And whosoever believeth on me should not abide in darkness. Light is also that strips away the darkness. Again, some of these are just overlapping, but they're important points that the light will dispel the darkness. And there are just a lot of people, do you know, who are walking in darkness today? They don't know where they're going. They don't even realize what eternity is all about. They're discouraged. They're despondent. They get into such a terrible situation, you know, in life, and their life is just miserable. Who are you? You are the light. You are to brighten their life up by the life that you live and the examples that you set. In John 3, and this is the condemnation, that light has come into the world, and men love darkness rather than light. Men seem to just enjoy that kind of life, but Jesus came into the world. But those who love darkness rather than light, their deeds were evil. For everyone that doeth evil hateth the light, neither cometh to the light, lest his deeds should be reproved. There are some things that love to live in darkness. Have you ever gone fishing and you roll over a rock and there's all them worms and all them little things in there? They don't stay there very long when the light hits them. They run away. But we are the light that shines on their evil deeds, and that he refers to here because of their deeds. It strips away. The light also warns us. You know, you come up to the railroad crossing, hear these red flashing lights. They warn you that danger is coming. They warn you that the train's coming down the track, and so you stop. And that's what we do as light of the world. We will warn people about danger in their lives. And in fact, back in the Old Testament, he says if someone that you know dies and you don't warn them, their blood is on your soul. So I have a responsibility to warn people, to show them the light. That's why I'm the light of the world. It warns of dangers that lie ahead. In Ephesians 5, have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness. Are you amazed, as I was, how much the Bible talks about darkness? And how much at this point that we are light in that darkness? He says, for it is shame even to speak of these things which are done to them in secret. But all things that are reproved are made manifest by the light. For whatsoever doth make manifest is light. Wherefore he saith, awake thou that sleepest, and arise from the dead, and Christ shall give thee light. Light protects. We go into a dark room. We don't know, as I said, where we're going, what we're going to do. But light will protect us. It protects a person from the dangers of darkness, from stumbling and falling and injuring themselves. Paul said, the night is far spent. The day is at hand. Let us therefore cast off the works of darkness, and let us put on the armor of light, which is that will protect us. Believers, Christians, brothers and sisters tonight, you are the light of the world. As long as I am in the world, Jesus said, I am the light of the world. But Jesus is no longer personally with us in this world. No, he's not here bodily at least, but his light is through the lives of his followers. Wherever that place is, they are to let their light shine. The world has no other light but you. One of the things that light does, it'll give you a good feeling. Did you know that? I mean, when it's dark outside and maybe through the night it's dark and it's just dripping, you can't see a thing, and all of a sudden you see the sun rise up. Don't you feel good? I do. I feel good when light comes back out of the darkness. And that's the way I think that all of us ought to be with one another. We ought to be the light of the world and bring cheer to everybody. I remember when I was 12 years old, there was a preacher by the name of Barney Welch. And that's Elaine's uncle. There's a lot of things said about Brother Barney. But I remember when I was at the age of 12, sitting in that little church building in Lee County Mills. Barney came into the church building, flew all the way from Texas up there. This was years ago. And I remember when he walked into that church building, it was a bright day. Barney never saw a stranger. He walked in, he shook hands with every one of us in that building. He had a smile on his face. He never complained. He just was so happy. And you know that he's the main reason that I'm preaching today. I said to myself, I want to be like that man. I want to bring happiness. I want to bring brightness into people's lives. And so he meant a great deal to me in my early days. And I say to you all, you can be that way. When you walk into a building, you can brighten things. You can do that by being happy, being jolly, and just rejoicing for the fact that you are a child of God. You can do that. And we need to do that. If you go into a dentist office, or you go into a place of business or whatever, you ought to brighten that place up. Have you ever been, this goes back to Saul as well. Have you ever been in a place where people are gathered around, they're telling filthy stories and they're cursing and swearing, and they look up and they see you there and they shut up? Have you ever been there? I've been there. I think if you are a Christian of any nature, you find yourself in that condition where people just shut up. Why? Because you shed light on the darkness of that situation. You have shed light on it, and they don't do it anymore while you're in their presence. When you leave, they may go on and tell their filthy stories, but they won't do it when you're there. Well, God bless you for that. You're the light of the world. You have brightened the world in a dark area. The whole world is to be illuminated by you. For so hath the Lord commanded us, saying, I have set thee to be a light of the Gentiles, that thou shouldest be salvation unto the ends of the earth. This was to Paul, as he was to be a light unto the Gentile world. Note the two purposes of letting your light shine, and I'm almost done. That they may see your good works. A Christian needs to show his good works before the world. Be careful, of course, how you do this, because it's not for your benefit, it's for God's benefit. Who is a wise man endued with knowledge among you? Let him show out of good conversation his works with meekness and wisdom. But the second reason we do this is that we may glorify God We must let our light shine in order that He is profited, that people will look beyond us, be able to see that we're only the workers of Christ and the workers of God in this world. If any man speak, let him speak as the oracles of God. If any man minister, let him minister with the ability that God giveth, that God in all things may be glorified through Jesus Christ, to whom be praise and dominion forever and ever. So in wrapping up tonight, a Christian's influence is in the salt of the earth and the light of the world. Salt is a seasoning quality. It is also a preservative. The use of salt down there in B, salt makes you thirsty. That's one thing I didn't cover. Salt makes you thirsty. If you're the salt of the earth, you will make people around you thirsty for what you have and hungering for what you have. Jesus said, blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness. And so you're the salt of the earth to bring that. It is a seasoning, it is preservative. But you know, another thing that salt does, I mentioned at the beginning, salt will melt the ice. If you're the salt of the earth, you will melt people's hearts. You have the ability to do that. All right? Don't just simply absorb the light, but be a light. That's my sermon tonight. We hope that we have given you something about the quality and the character of those who are Christians. And in doing so, we hope maybe that we might encourage or have encouraged someone here tonight to want to obey the gospel, to be a Christian. Or if there are those here who would like to repent of wrongs, having not been the salt of the earth or the light of the world, and you would like to return, we would ask you to come while we stand and while we sing this selected hymn. Page